All right, we're ready to jump into the Les Mis project, and we're going to start working on the mock-up. So I wanted to do a quick overview of kind of how we're going to put those together, show you kind of how a background can be built, and then you guys have already been starting to collect some of your images. So what I want you to do is start using some of these tools to start to put together your composited images. So here on the computer, we've got kind of the finished illustration. So I've merged all the layers so we can just see it, in its entirety. And I want to walk you just quickly through what those different layers are, and then we'll do some other little separate videos that will teach you some of the skills, how to do some of the things that we're talking about in more detail. So let's jump in here. So we're starting off with just a regular background. This is the first image that we've got here. So I like this one because it had these great stairs here and this old kind of brick building that's kind of appealing. There were some issues and things that I didn't like up here at the top, just part of his negative. And so with each of these, I've already gone through in the composite and I've done layer masking. We're going to talk about how to do the layer mask in a second, but I've got them disabled right now so that when we first look at it, we can see the whole picture and then we can see it with the masks. So that's the first picture. The second picture that I'm going to be using is this one here. So I really liked kind of the decorations, or the details that are here on this wall, and then also this brickwork here. The third image I'm going to be using is this building here, and I really just needed that for the top part of like the top of a building. And then the last image we're going to be using is this one here, which again, I think we're going to be using kind of these top parts of the building as well. And then the final part is I also felt like the sky was a little bit blank and that we needed some clouds as well. So we'll be adding those in at the end. So if we just turned all of them on, they're going to just be, sitting there on top of each other, right? So if I just went in and I copied and pasted each of these images, this is kind of what I would end up with. It would just, a big old mess. They're all just stacked on top of each other. But what I don't want you to do is to just cut them out, in the original picture using a lasso tool or the quick selection tool or any of the methods that we learned, and copying and pasting it and putting it inside of here. We're going to use layer masks instead. So when we do that, I'm going to go ahead and we can start to mask these. So I'll just go ahead. I'm just using the shift key to re-enable these. But what that's going to do, you can see the only part of that I'm actually using is that little top section of the building to give it kind of that top roof line, which the other picture was lacking, right? And this one, again, I'm just using that top piece just to create that kind of tip or the roof line of that building that's there in the foreground. With this other picture over here on this side, I'm just using that bottom part. I didn't need this wall over here, so I've taken that out and did keep the brick that's inside of here. I also masked it so that it would come around this area as well. I used the selection and then painted up against that edge. And then our final one is this building here. And so you can see we kind of have this rough edge up at the top. And so the last one is just that basic area, right? So there's our 4 pictures, and those are blended together, and it's starting to look pretty good. Then the other part that I did is I felt like, well, now I've got this white background, I've got some tone in the sky here. So I just selected this area using just the color picker, and I picked up a color from over here and set that as my foreground color. And then once I had that, then I went ahead and painted in this layer here so that it would fill in with a solid color in that area as well, which helped out quite a bit. And then there was still it seemed like it was missing something down in here and a few little things that needed some touching up. And so I used the cloning tool and kind of built out part of that foreground so that it would, build that bottom part of the brick that it kind of needed. And a little bit back in this part here as well. Then some of the things that started to stand out, it seemed like that this might have been a little bit too bright. There's quite a bit of difference of color between those two. So I made an adjustment layer here, which we'll talk about using adjustment layers. And again, it has a mask so that it's only, because we've already masked that image, it's only applying it to that one area. And so that made it a little bit darker so that that would kind of blend together a little bit more evenly. Um, the next thing that it needed, this side over here was also a little bit too dark. So again, using an adjustment layer, I went ahead and kind of darkened that area as well. And then, let's see what this one is. Oh, this was the girl, so putting her there in the foreground. And then the sky, now we've got the sky up in there. And again, we don't need it to show up inside of the building. So again, making a mask and allowing it just to stay into those areas so that we now get that sky. And then the last part is the curve for over here. That was coming out too dark as well, but we don't want it to make everything lighter or darker, so it's just affecting that one part. Now, because these are all coming from different pictures, the color isn't matching very well. So even though, you know, they're blending together okay, the contrast and color is really making them kind of stand out. So an easy way to kind of uniformly change that is to use an adjustment layer with a solid color fill. And we're going to be changing that into a blending mode, which is going to be color. And when we do that, it then kind of equalizes all of the color so that all of it has that same kind of uniform sepia tone. And you know, the color things become black and white as well. So we'll talk about kind of creating that. And then the last part was a little bit of a vignette just to kind of darken down these edges. A lot of the old cameras kind of had some fall off. So it kind of helps keep our attention kind of in this area here as well. And then since right now we're eventually going to be replacing whoever our model and subject's going to be in that final composite, then we're just going to have her removed as well. So what we want is this background, and then we can take this background and we can start to go out and photograph people that we know, well, maybe I want somebody standing on the stairs and somebody else is going to be up higher. We have a pretty good idea of how we want to place the subject. And so when we go and do our shooting, we can make sure we get the right angles that are going to work for the backgrounds that we've created.